Hello, everybody. Oh, and here's Tristan.
Finally.
Hi, Tristan.
I'm so pleased you put it on Voxer because somehow I got it on the wrong hour.
Oh,
I thought I was an hour before. Yeah, I thought it was 4 o'clock here. I've just been lying on my bed with my bad back, and
oh no!
then suddenly thought, "Hang on, what time is it?"
It's
How are
tricky
we?
with all the time changes.
Yeah, it's tricky. I didn't include the time zone for the UK because I was like, I'm so confused with daylight saving times. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've become very reliant on my Alexa. I'll just be like, Alexa, what time is it in wherever?
Oh, that is smart. Yeah.
You're right, Tony. It is a reasonable time UK. 5 o'clock here.
Yes. We do not always on my channel. We do not always stream at reasonable UK times, but welcome, Tony. Welcome, Carmen. Awesome. Having
Excellent.
a great World for November.
Yay.
Great.
Hi, Ariana. Hi, Cool Gamer. Welcome, everybody, to our reading sprints for Remembrance Day. Our World War November reading sprints. So I think everybody among the hosts is going to be reading for World War November today, but you can read what you want, but you can join us and read World War November books if you would like. Welcome, John.
And if this is a first reading sprint for everyone, I hope you enjoy it.
Yes.
It's a great way. If you're stuck trying to get started reading, you're in a reading slump, sprints are like the best way to get started.
Exactly. It just gets you over that initial, you can just get started. Hi. Hi, Mark. Thank you again. By the way, in case you guys aren't aware, Mark did create a Discord server for World War November, and it's been really active. So thank you so much, Mark. That was really, really generous. Maybe I'll include that in the description for later. So, and if this is your first reading sprints, it's really easy. We're just going to put a time at the bottom of the screen, and we'll just do the minutes because all of our hours are different and all over the place. So we'll do the minutes. So, if the sprint is 15 minutes, we'll put, if it was 15 minutes from now, let's do 15 minutes from 9:05, it would be 20. And then we would come back at 20. For me, it's 9:05, but for you, it's, I don't even know, 5:05 or whatever,
Yeah, it is 5:05.
Yeah. So,
what books everyone reading?
Yeah,
I'll go first. So every morning, most of my reading gets done in the morning. And so I usually have a couple hours in the morning before I go to school. And so what I have been rotating through is I've been reading or trying to read a chapter out of A World Undone, the story of the Great War by G.J. Meyer, which is absolutely excellent. And then I've been flipping over to Storm of Steel by Ernst Junger. And that's been very interesting, good firsthand account. And then if I have any time left over whatsoever, I've went to 1915, The Death of Innocence by Lynn McDonald. And I haven't gotten nearly as far in this one as I have the other two. So that's what I've been reading, been thoroughly enjoying them. Highly recommend A World Undone.
Okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Peg?
Oh, well, let me just say that, yes, Bill, I read A World Undone a few years ago, and I loved it. It was one of the best single volume treatments that I've ever read.
Well, and what I've found that's probably the best about it is I think it's something that somebody who has no historical background or just a novice can come in and learn a lot about World War I, and it's written where everybody can understand it. It's not like a over your head scholarly text, although it is scholarly.
Yes. Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
It does. Yeah. I'm glad you're enjoying that as much as I did. Well, today I'm going to be rotating a little bit because I just love to hop around. I do want to make some headway in the memoir. Testament of Youth of Vera Brittain. So I'm going to be reading this, and I haven't gotten too far into that, but I'm also really intrigued by Undertones of War, the one that I introduced in our last video. So Edmund Blunden, I've read the first 10 pages or so, and wow, just fantastic. I like that first person experience. And for fiction, I'm really intrigued by this this book, Mud and Misery, by a new author, Patrick Kirk, following the adventures of Tom Dickerson in the trenches in 1917.
Cool.
In France. So I'm probably gonna just read around a little bit and try to make some headway.
Yeah, Blunden's awesome. He's just he's such a rich writer. How about you, Chelsea? What are you reading today?
I'm like Peg. I'm going to be jumping around. I always, for reading sprints, like to have a couple different books going on for different sprint sessions. So I'm going to be reading another essay or two out of the essay collection that I'm reading about Lucy Maud Montgomery and her war literature. So I'm really, really enjoying that so far. I haven't read any literary criticism of Montgomery before. I've read nonfiction about her, but not specifically literary criticism. So that's super interesting, and it's contextualizing her books in a whole new way for me. And then I'm planning to start All Quiet on the Western Front. That's one that I really want to make sure I read this month, so I'm going to start that. And I'm really close to finishing up the audiobook that I'm listening to, which is A Duty to the Dead, which is the first in the World War I mystery series that I started. So I have, I think, an hour and a half left on that audiobook. So I might swap in some audio time.
Cool.
All right.
What are you reading, Christy? So no, you go first. I'm just stepping to grab something in my room. Hang on. You carry on.
All right. Well, I see several people are reading Testament of Youth today. So I might be working on that because it is over 600 pages, which I didn't realize. So I need to make progress on that. But I also really, like Chelsea, I really want to start All Quiet on the Western Front. So we'll see what works this morning. We'll just try them both out, and I'm excited. So thank you all for telling us what you're going to be reading. We love to hear what you're reading. Are you all set, Tristan? What are you reading? Yes.
Testament of Youth. I'm already, I don't know, over 100 pages in. I've been reading a load of war poetry as well, particularly Rupert Brooke and Wilfred Owen. Of course, sadly, two poets who lost their lives during the war. Because, of course, World War I was, the poets' war in some respects. So many poets went down during that war. And my wife, who is a crafter, Sweet Journaling, if you want to look her up, has made me my World War I bookmark. Just to drop in. Yeah, she's sort of got this thing where she'll make bookmarks for the books I'm reading to match. She's very, very expert collager. She is on YouTube. Sweet Journaling, she's called. She's on TikTok as well. With quite a large account there. But yeah, but the war poetry, but Testament of Youth has been fantastic so far. A couple of lines that I had talked about a searchlight looking for an airship. Said it was an illuminated pencil tracing the indigo spaces of the night. Thought that was a gorgeous phrase. And there was one earlier today, which I got my, let's have a look. Can I find it? Just because some of the phraseology is just the best. Oh no, forget that. If I find it, I'll tell you where it is. But it's just a single line that she uses. She's an Oxford graduate, and yeah, phenomenal how she starts before the war and brings you into it with her love of her life as well. And yeah, that is fascinating. All Quiet on the Western Front, of course. Yeah, spectacular book. There's some amazing turns of phrase in that book, and it's very, very, very vivid. It's there's a I won't say. We'll carry on. I could talk forever about that book.
Well, we
I'm
just got done watching the 1979 version in my class on Thursday, and
Oh wow!
the kids had their typical reaction. So it's such a great movie.
What was their reaction? They go out in the field, dig a hole, start throwing things.
Well, I don't want to tell the reaction because it gives away the end. So
That's very true. Are we set to do our first sprint?
Yeah, let me just go through some of these comments because people are mentioning some really interesting things that I've never even heard of. So that's really awesome. Let's see.
That sounds fantastic.
Neat.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Look at
Ooh.
the
I've heard good things about that book.
Yeah. Didn't Lord of the Rings come out essentially of the First World War and him perceiving World War II on the horizon?
Mm-hmm.
I may have got that wrong, but
No, it's true. That's like why some of the scenes. I mean, I haven't read Lord of the Rings, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But I heard that some of the scenes where there's like the evil person has like destroyed the land and stuff was built out of his imagery of trench warfare and kind of the obliteration of all living plants and everything.
yeah.
He always, I think, said that he wasn't writing it as like a metaphor or anything like that, but you can definitely see the influence. Like,
There was an inspiration there, or
Yeah,
some
definitely.
kind of motif stolen from it.
exactly. Mhm.
Lovely. Do you know what? I just love the title of that.
The
The
lamps
lamp
went
went out in Europe. That's so poetic.
Mhm. Tough.
I can't tell you about Fall of Giants because I've not read it. All Quiet on the Western Front, of course, is one of the seminal works, one of the great classics of World War One. So if you wanted to nail a classic as well as World War One, then All Quiet on the Western Front would be your. He's got some extraordinary imagery. Although All Quiet on the Western Front is a novel, it is taken from Remarque's actual experiences. I'll give you some of the poignancy then. Okay. Here's a quote from All Quiet on the Western Front. It's about when he sees an enemy soldier dead and how they don't hate each other. And he just says, how much misery there can be in two little spots that you could cover with your thumbs, their eyes. You know, it's really poignant because, you know, the soldiers, it was brutal. They did not like the home attitude of celebrating the war. Yeah, there's lots of great quotes from All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah.
It probably matters how much time you have to read too, because Fall of Giants is a monster. It's
Yeah.
800 or 900 pages, I think, maybe more. I can't remember exactly. And then on top of that, what perspective do you want? So All Quiet on the Western Front's more from the soldiers' point of view, and then Fall of Giants is more of the political atmosphere. So,
and if you want to get through the central book of the read along, which is Testament of Youth, think about the fact that this is about 600 pages.
Yeah.
All Quiet on the Western Front is 200 pages.
There you go.
So we were talking in our chat about maybe only doing this for an hour. Is that kind of where we're thinking, like going for spending an hour?
Don't let me limit you. Just to let everyone know, I've got a horrendous bad back with an extruding disc, and I was the one that brought up I might only last an hour because of the pain, but I might last longer. You don't know.
So if we want to do like an hour, then we can do like a couple shorter sprints, or we can do like one longer one. So what would you guys prefer, like a 30-minute sprint, or like two 15-minute sprints, or what would you guys prefer?
Yeah, go with 15s.
15s?
Because then if you come across, if you're jumping between books, it gives you a place to break and drop to another one. And if you can pick up any quotes on the way, feel free to share them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. So why don't we do 16 to 31
Okay.
and we can get started. You guys ready?
Okay. Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Where's my pen? Oh, where's my pen now?
And that is the end of the first sprint. How did everybody do?
That flew by.
Yeah. I too tend to spend, I don't tend to read in 15-minute increments. Usually when I sit down to read, it's like towards the end of the evening and I'm there for an hour or something. So.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm being really just further drawn into Blunden here. It's fantastic. He tells about he wasn't spared like to see death until he got to the front, because there was a scene where a sergeant major was trying to train some of the troops with a rifle grenade, and he says here, and Blunden's on the outer circle of the guys standing all around watching the training, and the sergeant major says, I've been down here since 1914 and I've never had an accident. And then there was a strange, hideous clang. And then he feels himself lying down on the ground, like an explosion just happened. Wow. And he had fired the grenade, but by some error had burst at the muzzle of the rifle. So now the instructor was lying with mangled head, dead, and others lay near him, also blood masked, dead and alive. Yeah. So I was like, wow, that just happened in training before they even got to the front lines. So I was like, oh, wow, what an introduction. So I get the feeling, yeah, this is going to be a pretty devastating book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And written by a poet as well. What's so good about that is they're obsessed with life, aren't they, poets?
Yes.
And so the humanity is big to them. But talk about an awful foreshadowing for him. My days. Yeah. It's like that was by accident. You'll be going to a place where they were trying to do it on purpose. You know?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Just by accident, which happens in war. People don't really report on that too much, but there's tons of training fatalities and it happens.
Yeah.
You know?
In Testament of Youth, Vera Brittain, she's already mentioned. It's really interesting because she keeps a diary before the war, and she's always a diarist. So she's got so many snippets of newspapers that she's copied down. And I've just read that the Lusitania was sank, just this out of the way comment. But she talks about the friendly fire, as it were. Don't call it that then, but she talks about the reports coming back from one of the battles of several thousand of their own men blown up by their own bombardment because they mistimed everything. But I love the stoic take of everybody. There's one guy, he writes back to her. He said, the day the Lusitania sank ended appropriately as a day of disasters because Hill 60, which was an important stronghold captured by the Allies during the Second Battle of Ypres, it got recaptured by the Germans. So all that effort was wasted. And she said she got a melancholy letter from a friend to say that he had been under shell fire and it was a nerve-wracking job. It's like, talk about understated. Someone else called it horror piled upon horror till one feels that the world can scarcely go on any longer. That's far more vivid. But, you know, typically British stiff upper lip. Nerve-wracking job, isn't it?
That's well, and how appropriate, too, that we're doing this on Remembrance Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, very important.
I do think everyone should read these books because
absolutely,
it's just the absurdness of war is ridiculous. And you see the ones at home who are hammering the drum, the war drum, and getting all these ones to go, but not knowing what it's like over there. And none of the guys in the trenches want to do it. You know, they say one of them came across a grave which had two brave German soldiers lie here. That's the end of an English trench. Mm-hmm. And then they went over the top and got into a German trench where they found the sign, 5 gallant English officers lie buried here. And that was put up by the Germans. You know, so they respect each other, but are murdering each other at the behest of those in charge. It's crazy. is not pleasant.
Well, how did you guys do, Bill and Chelsea? Do you want to go first, Bill?
Sure. I was reading Storm of Steel, and I'm on the chapter Daily Life in the Trenches, and he was going through just some of his daily encounters, and it really brings it to life. And he says, give me a second, let me make sure I have the right. Yeah. So the 7th of October, 1915. Standing at dawn on the fire step opposite our dugout next to the sentry when a rifle bullet ripped through his forage cap without harming a hair on his head. At the same time, 2 pioneers were wounded on the wires. One had a ricochet through both legs and the other a ball through his ear. In the morning, the sentry on our left flank was shot through both cheekbones. Blood spurted all over him in thick gouts, and he kind of goes on, and it puts you right there in the trenches, and just how devastating that was. And then he has another one here. Let me see if I can find it. Might be on the next page. Oh, 14th of November. Last night I dreamed I was shot in the hand. As a result, I'm more than usually careful all day, and you get this. It's just like, geez Louise. He does a good job of, he's kind of blunt and in your face about it. There's really no softening the blow, so to speak. He's just there with it. And I've found that to be kind of fascinating, and definitely not a place that I would want myself to be. And then I was reading in A World Undone this morning, and it was talking about just prior to the start of the war, the leadership has gotten to the point where, they wanted to mobilize, but then they realized once they started mobilizing, there's no turning back, and then you get this when you get to reading about what happens once mobilization happens. It's just astounding.
Wow.
That's all I got.
How about you, Chelsea?
Yeah, I was reading, so I started reading my essay collection, and then for the second sprint, I'm going to move on to the fiction. So the essay I was reading is called Mapping Patriotic Memory, L.M. Montgomery and Mary Ritter Hamilton. And Mary Ritter Hamilton was a Canadian war artist who went over after the war for 3 years and painted hundreds of paintings of different battlefields. And so they were kind of comparing and contrasting how these two Canadian women memorialized the war in the same time period, which was really interesting. The quote that kind of stood out to me, it says, "While the male modernist artists such as Hemingway or Sassoon reacted with anger, Montgomery and Hamilton, whose family members and friends had served in the war, took radically different positions, and their work required different approaches and perspectives to appreciate the texture of their commemorative aesthetic. Montgomery and Hamilton were hoping to heal, experimenting with the cultural codes of mourning, which are also infused with patriotism. In doing so, they created Canadian landscapes of war memory in which specific locales became sites of both patriotism and mourning, of war memory and nation building." So they're kind of examining the tension there between how to remember the bad parts, obviously the horror, the trauma, but then how to take that forward and how to kind of move forward from that as a country and as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
It was really interesting. They said that after Hamilton came back with her paintings, they set up exhibits and people were able to go visit and finally see, because obviously this is before, like, there was photography, but not as widespread obviously as now, and there wasn't as much like film footage and stuff. So for a lot of people, seeing Hamilton's paintings were the first time they were able to see where their family members had passed away. So it's kind of the first experience where they could go to this exhibit and see the battlefields where their sons or brothers had fought and died, which is, I'd never thought about war paintings in that way. I thought of it kind of more as like a museum, like documenting it for a museum or something, but I hadn't thought about it having that personal aspect as well. So that was really interesting to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, that's like a really different perspective on that, how people would see it. But, I'm not a veteran, so probably veterans feel that way anytime or families of veterans, when they're seeing pictures of wherever they were. That's
Yeah.
the association.
Because of course back then everything was vetted, wasn't it? You couldn't have negative stuff going back in letters. You couldn't have photographs. Back of what it was really like. It was only through journalism, the propaganda machine.
Yeah.
So it would have been quite interesting. I know, actually, interesting with that. One of the things Fitzgerald talks about, F. Scott Fitzgerald talks about it in, I think, Tender of the Night. But a popular pastime was for people to go to France shortly after this, when the memoirs like Younger's Storm of Steel that you mentioned there, Bill, it's unflinching because they couldn't tell the truth at the time. And these ones, a lot of them wanted to tell the truth. Like, this was awful. I mean, Younger's interesting because he sees the nobility in fighting, that old Teutonic passion. But ones like Graves, for instance, Blunden, they didn't see that. And people used to go to France and they would sit in the trenches reading the memoirs.
Wow.
Wow.
And there was a kickback against society of raging anger because it was a whole lost youth generation. It was the young sent to war. And of course, you get the Roaring Twenties as a direct result of this war. Suddenly you go from Edwardian prim and proper morality to the flappers who have got, some skirts above the knee, scandalously enough. But, there's a direct reaction by the youth. They throw everything out the window. They're like, well, we don't trust you. You killed us all. And then they read these memoirs and what we're talking about now. And they're like, saw these paintings and we're like, no, we're not going to respect our elders anymore. Massive, massive shift because of this.
I was thinking about that yesterday or Thursday when we were finishing up All Quiet on the Western Front, when the main character goes back home and he's with his dad's buddies having a beer. And they're talking about, how's life at the front. And he tries to start talking to him about it, and they kind of just hush him up. Oh, you're only seeing one small part of it. You're not seeing the whole big picture. This is how it should be going. And they're only getting, of course, the propaganda machine, and they have no idea what's going on. And that same thing popped in my head when we were finishing that up.
Yeah, brilliant. It's so true.
Mm-hmm.
You can understand why many veterans, even today, like you think of the Gulf War or Afghanistan or whatever, they don't tend to want to talk to civvies because it's just like, we have no idea, do we, what they're going through. But when you read the memoirs, they write them for one purpose, and it's to say that war is futile, generally speaking. And you always have these wars when you've had a period of peace. A couple of generations come along, forget that old war, and then walk straight into another one. How did you get on, Christy?
Oh, I'm still sort of near the beginning of Testament of Youth. So she's quite bitter about a lot of things even before the war starts. So I'm getting through that, and yeah. But she is funny. Tony mentioned earlier that she's quite funny, and yeah, she is. She's funny. So.
Yeah, I get that one.
Her writing is very engaging, I would say.
She's not always likable, is she?
No. No.
She comes across a little bit pretentious at times, but I think she's trying to be completely open. I think she's trying to do a third-person analysis of herself and tell you quite honestly what she was thinking, because she does criticize herself at times. But yeah, I do actually love her take on the struggles that women were having at this time. How society was pegging them back.
Comparing her school experience with her brothers is quite interesting.
Yeah.
I do, though, feel like she would be judging me a lot if she knew me.
I think she'd judge a lot of people.
Yeah. I have trouble reading authors like that, but I do want to hear her experience, so I'm going to keep going.
Well, you got to. I'm just trusting that going into a war as a nurse, you're going to see a mellowing of a personality from being strident and dogmatic to suddenly we're very small and insignificant.
Well,
that's great, Tony.
Yeah.
Which edition do you have? We'll wait for you to type.
So she
Speaking of-
edited some of her opinions, like she changed them when she realized they weren't popular, or I wonder what he means by that. Do you guys know, like, or Tristan, did she try to?
No. This one's actually a new one on me. Testament of You.
Okay, yeah, me too. So
I haven't done any background on this, and of course, I never read the introductions to books because why do they call them introductions? It should come
I
at
know.
the end.
spoils everything.
Yeah,
It
here's
does. I
an
never read
introduction.
the
What
intros.
happens is.
And,
save it
and
for
my
the end.
interpretation is
yeah.
sorry to
No.
interrupt. Sorry, go ahead, Peg.
But no, I was just going to say, I agree. If I do read the introductions, it's after I've read the book for additional information, but I don't want my opinion to be skewed from the get-go. So,
Mhm.
or color
Yeah,
it.
you kind of want to experience it first and then see what the introduction writer
Yeah.
thinks, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Vintage do write good introductions. Fair play. But Matthew
Well-
Arnold, you know, the top class writer, of course, around this time as well, or just before.
Yep.
He always recommended, if you want to read a book deeply, he said, read a biography or two of the author before you read their books, but never ever read the introduction to a book. But he says,
like
if you read their life experiences, their biography, he says, you'll begin to see influences within their writing. I always thought that was quite a good recommendation, but I'm just too eager to get into the novel to stop and read the biography. So
I remember the first time I read. Yeah, I just remember times when I was a young reader just starting getting into classics. I would read the introduction and be like, oh, okay. Do I need to read it? But then when I would actually read the book, I would be like, I have completely opposite feelings about this book from. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Do we want to do another 15-minute sprint and then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we'll just sign off after that, probably. So I think we'll go from 48 to the 03.
Okay.
Weird times.
It's all right.
Alrighty, let's go. That is the end of our second sprint. How did everybody do?
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm diving in now to Testament of Youth. And how funny that you had just mentioned Matthew Arnold, Tristan. And I come across her here talking about the few books that were in her parents' library, which was not a lot at the time. And but a few books came into the house, and one of them was Matthew Arnold's Sohrab and Rustum, a book, I guess, of poetry. And now she's discoursing on some of that and some of the other books that she loved growing up. So it's kind of neat. So far, she doesn't sound too jaded or harsh, Christy. At least not to me, but she does, she's kind of funny. She's kind of funny, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. How did you do, Chelsea?
Really good. I got 30 pages into All Quiet on the Western Front. And
Nice.
I think I'm gonna have to finish it today. Keep reading once these sprints are done because it's really, really good so far. It's a an interesting mix of like kind of some really funny humorous moments, and then it'll flip to being super hard hitting and somber. It's probably real life when you're a group of 20-year-old guys. You're not gonna just stop making jokes and stuff, but then all of a sudden something will happen and it's like, oh right, they're in the trenches.
Yeah.
That was a really good book to listen to on audio, and I can't remember who the narrator was, but the voice was perfect for the book, and I thoroughly enjoyed. I listened to it. What was it, a couple months ago, and really loved listening to it too.
Yeah, I really, it was part I kind of have enjoyed the most so far is this kind of at the end of chapter 1 coming into chapter 2, there's an analysis about what youth means, and they had got kind of this encouraging letter back from their school teacher saying like, oh, you're the iron youth generation, and they're saying they don't even feel young anymore, that they're already feel old, that their youth is long gone. But then it goes into talking about how because they were young, they were kind of more malleable to be convinced to join up and everything because they trusted these authority figures in their lives, their parents, their teachers, people in government and stuff that were saying that this was what young people should be doing. And then, it quickly starting to feel a lot wiser than those people very quickly. So interesting commentary on youth and who really knew what was going on and who had more wisdom about what decisions to make.
The sense of betrayal becomes palpable in that book and several of the others. Actually, where I am in this Testament of Youth, already she's very much resentful for the dons in the college, Oxford University. Like, what do they really know? It's easy for them to sit there sending all these young people to war, some of whom are brilliant, brilliant minds. The betrayals. There's a phrase in All Quiet on the Western Front. I've got my quote book somewhere.
Speaking of quotes, I just had to share. Kurt, there was a quote that he wanted to share with you, Tristan.
Oh, good.
It was in response to a comment you made earlier. So the next great war won't arrive until everyone who remembers the last one is dead. This is Cormac McCarthy.
Oh, Cormac McCarthy. Yeah, what a great, there's an insightful person. It's so true, though. And the people who think war is noble and beautiful and brave and honourable have never, ever fought in a war. Someone else said that. They said it much more beautifully than that. But, yeah, that's very true as well.
That's something I found kind of interesting in this book was he's you think about soldiers, their higher ups are teaching them to hate the enemy. The enemy's the bad guy, et cetera, et cetera. And he says in this, he says, throughout the war, it was always my endeavor to view my opponent without animus and to form an opinion of him as a man on the basis of the courage he showed. I would always try and seek him out in combat and kill him, and I expected nothing else from him. But never did I entertain mean thoughts of him. When prisoners fell into my hands later on, I felt responsible for their safety and would always do everything in my power for them. And I thought that was kind of interesting. You get this, even though you're enemies, you're almost your comrade in arms. And that was just something I took out of this. And then right before that, what made me think about it even more was, they're in December, and it's not quite the Christmas truce, but they're in December, and they come up next to the barbed wire, and they're starting to exchange stuff, and then all of a sudden a shot fires out and kills one of the guys, and so everybody drops, and he takes charge and is trying to figure out which one of you idiots did that, and of course the guy on the other side yells back at him, well, there's some unscrupulous bastards on your side too. And so just back and forth between the soldiers, where you get this respect, but at the same time there's always idiots out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I continued reading on Storm of Steel because I'm a slow reader. So and I hate stopping in the middle of a chapter. So I was trying to finish the chapter. I didn't quite read as much as you did, but I got a few pages done, and I'll probably go home and finish the chapter. So I'm on a good stopping spot. But I'm enjoying this look at life in the trenches, just that daily interaction between the soldiers, whether it's your comrade or the guy across the way. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it helps doing month-long immersions with reading like this, because you get to, it's not just one account which you take in and forget. It all starts making a very strong background.
Mm-hmm.
And when you drop memoirs in as well, it makes it very human. And it should cause you to stop and ask things about yourself. Interesting. If anyone on here is reading Robert Graves or Goodbye to All That for their read this month, there's a point I noticed when reading Younger's Bill that I believe Robert Graves and Ernst Junger were actually on opposite sides of the same line at one point, according to the dates and the place. I mean, how weird is that? Two memoir writers.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the lines could be miles and miles long, so they may not have been literally opposite each other. But he talks about the same thing, Robert Graves. He talks about a horse that gets injured in no man's land. And it's just giving this horrible sound, and it's going on for hours until eventually one of the, or was that Younger said that? I can't remember. No, I think it's Graves. And someone goes over the top with a white flag and goes to the hole where the horse is and gets hold of the horse and puts it out of its misery. And then
that might have been Younger.
Okay.
Because
he
that
talks about the
cat
as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, I
the
think
white cat that goes between trenches.
And the white flag came out. I think I read that yesterday, maybe, or the day before. So that sounds very familiar.
It's so incongruous. Because they were like, the animals shouldn't suffer because they didn't ask to be brought into this war, which is quite true. But what's ironic is several million men also didn't ask to be took into the war.
Well, I think in this case, animals are just seen as ultimately innocent, whereas even if some of the men were drafted or they didn't sign, it's just that thing with animals. It's like people who have a heart, who love animals, right? They will, if they're on the opposite sides, they'll do something to help that quintessence of innocence that still lives on this earth resides in animals, I think. And it's just like that little taste of like what heaven should have been or is But it's just I don't know, like with Warhorse, I got chills every time seeing that horse jump over the trench, and you see these men down in the dirt looking up at something so transcendent as this animal just leaping above them. I don't know, it just it gets me on a gut level. There's just something so profound and beautiful.
I think it's something like that. So, I mean, the horse is the most romantic of images. And I think that's why it just tells you war's wrong, doesn't it? When you have such an incongruity of beauty, of poetry in motion with something like that. And then the carnage that humans are unleashing on each other.
Yes.
I think it's Vera Brittain. She makes a comment in this. She says, can we really have got to the age of the motor, the engine, the airplane, and still be killing one another? It's just it's a damning indictment that no matter how modern we may feel, humans, when it comes to governance, I don't think humans have gone one step forward. Maybe the odd bit here and there, but overall, poverty, warfare, suffering, we're masters at causing it.
It's funny you mentioned, or that quote mentioned the motor, the airplane, the engine, when like most of those advancements happen during times of war for the purpose of being able to kill people more effectively.
Shocking, isn't it? Yeah, we have nuclear power today to provide energy, but we got it from warfare as well.
Right.
It's
crazy.
Yeah, and that's amazing because World War II, there were ones who were alive in World War I that saw World War II and still thought it was okay. I mean, it was probably a different motivation to go to war in World War II, but even so, and of course, I only read recently about Hiroshima, that several cities have been bombed, Kyoto being one, been firebombed by the Allies and laid waste, because wooden cities, weren't they, the Japanese old cities? But they didn't firebomb Nagasaki and Hiroshima specifically because they knew they were going to test out the nuclear bomb on it and wanted to see how that would look afterwards. I mean, who is sitting in an office with a mind that calculated shouldn't really be in charge? There's a comedian in Scotland called Billy Connolly. He's hilarious. And he actually said, I do think the desire to be a politician should rule you out from being one. Yeah.
Well, and then on All Quiet on the Western Front, and I'm thinking of the movie. I can't remember if the dialogue was exactly the same in the book, but you remember the old guy who goes for the food. What's his? I'm going to go blank on his name.
Is that Chardon?
No,
he's not old. It's Cat.
Yes. Well, you remember they just got done with the Kaiser pinning the medals, and they're all in that building. And he says, "Does anybody really even know why we're fighting?" And they start to try to come up with answers. And he's like, the Frenchies never offended me. The only few that I've known been kind to me. So why are we actually fighting this war? That's what it comes down to. None of the soldiers knew why they were there.
No.
And I would even question, do the high command know why they're there?
No.
Now, again, like you said, World War II, there is some difference there, but still, when we're studying World War I, why are we there?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, with the World War I, it was known as the Great War, and World War II is known as the Good War. There is the case to be made that not all war is. Sometimes it's a necessity. When you have a great evil that rises up, your answer can't be to sit there and I'm going to be peaceful while the evil is going. The Nazis in this case. Rampaging, you have to stand up and fight. There is a time, like Ecclesiastes says, there's a time for everything under the sun. I never understood. I really do believe World War I was pointless. I mean, it didn't from the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, and it just spiraled And I just think someone smart, like you were saying, Tristan, someone in control should have, from multiple European powers, should have put the brakes on this. But at the time, there was still that glory about fighting wars and patriotism and rah, rah, rah. Whereas with World War II, it was like, yeah, we have no choice. This is a battle for civilization against fascism, and people are going to die. And that's the nature of war. It's unfortunate. It's part of the human condition. And I just feel like, we just have to differentiate between going to war over pointless things where we're smart people, we can stop this, and something that says, no, we have to do this. As distasteful and painful as it may be, there is no choice.
Well, and I've been reading, I told you I've been reading this World Undone, and the author, Meyer, does a great job of going through and showing that there were so many opportunities where this war could have stopped or not started. They could have put the brakes on, and somebody was worried about what somebody else would think. That's what it came down to. Everybody's egos got in the way, and they could have put the brakes on. And it should have stayed a local conflict is what it should have done. They should have handled it at the local level with the assassination. And instead, everybody, the mobilization, and once things got rolling, it got out of control.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why I enjoy World War I more than World War II, though, just because there is so much more ability to be nuanced and kind of appreciate all the sides, whereas World War II is such a more clear kind of black and white war, so I don't find it as interesting. Whereas World War I, because you can really examine all the sides in that way.
Yeah.
It's a history worth learning because there's so much you can learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about World War II is obviously the Nazis. That's obvious, why people wanted to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting how the German nation, the thing that led them to go into another war. And of course, that was the fallout of World War I, and how the Allies really penalized the German people. A.J.P. Taylor's Origins of World War II, very, very insightful on that. But it reminds me of other people I've read, someone who made the point that imagine if we never had any violent films, or if all films to do with violence, the perpetrator of violence and the one who wants to start wars and all that, if every story we heard stigmatized that kind of person, and that the person that was always a hero was the person that wouldn't kill someone else, how different people would think, like train people from a young age that violence is wrong. And if everyone was trained that way to always think anyone that even suggests fighting is majorly problematic. I think the phrase was, until society, was it George Bernard Shaw, until society learns to heroize the pacifist, there will always be warfare. And, I'm not saying it's as simple as that, but nonetheless, he's got a point. The warriors even now are valorized. And so who would people aspire to be? Whereas the ones who are against it are always called the cowards. So you wouldn't want to be them. That was Bernard Shaw, one of Bernard Shaw's points. I believe it was Bernard Shaw anyway. Interesting idea.
Well, and to add into that, not to get into too much of the psychology side of that, but looking at it from a middle school teacher's perspective, you talk to those kids about their video games. Yeah. Those don't cause us to be violent. We're not violent because of those. We don't have to be violent because we're playing those. I mean, they are dead set on it. And I'm like, I think you guys might be opening your minds up to stuff that maybe you don't need to. And they will argue tooth and nail that is not the case. It's quite the interesting discussion in class when it comes up.
The reason for that, of course, is because you can say it doesn't affect you until you're put into the pressure cooker of making decisions. And then what you tacitly agree to, you will, what's the old proverb? faithful in little, faithful in much, not faithful in little, not faithful in much. You can't touch certain things, and when the pressure comes to build up on those, your actions will come out in the pressure cooker at a magnification of what you do when you're not under pressure. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. It's like when people say music doesn't affect them, and it has no effect on psychology and all that, and lyrics and all that. I'm like, why does Hollywood spend billions on the scores to their films? It's because music affects you. And it's the same with what you play as well.
Well, and if that wasn't the case, why is it when people go play ball games, they don't listen to some really slow music before the ball game?
Yeah.
No, they get stuff to get you fired up.
The team's waltzing in. Well, there we go. Now, I sadly will have to break because my back is in absolute agony now. It's on fire. So,
oh no. So sorry, Tristan. I hope that resolves itself soon. I've
had it for a long time, and I was just getting better from it, and it's just suddenly seized up again. So it may be surgery to fix this one. But of course, surgery on a disc, which requires fusing 2 vertebrae, sometimes works, sometimes doesn't do anything, and sometimes makes things worse. So, roll of the dice. But at least I'm not in a trench.
True.
I'll trade this any day.
All right. Well, it was good to see you, and I hope the pain will lessen and you'll feel better.
Yeah, and I look forward to doing another. I don't know whether we're going to be doing another sprint or anything. I know we're meeting up at the end of the month for the Testament of Youth chat. So
yes, we'll let everybody know. We're still deciding. Is it time to go? I was just chatting, so I was missing.
I was just saying, I'm not saying everyone else has to. I just have to because my back is like.
Yeah, I'm sure it's way past.
I've got to go and lie flat.
Okay.
But great to see you all. It's been brilliant.
It's good to see you.
Thanks for hanging out, Tristan.
I could probably hang out for one more sprint and one more 15 minutes if anyone. I'm just throwing that in, but if people have to go, I get that too. So
I'm down for one more. Are you guys down for one more?
I'm good for one more. I had to change locations to plug in, but
okay, sounds good. Let's do one more.
I've got another endless battery life.
Okay, I do have one question. I am at school. I know the bells went off once. I hit the mute button last time. Did you hear the bells any more than just the once?
I didn't even
mute worked. All right.
Yes,
I do
mute
apologize
worked.
for that. I wasn't thinking about that.
Absolutely. We're good.
Okay.
Awesome. So we can go. So we'll do 15. We'll do another 15-minute sprint, and I'll put the time down below. I just have to calculate it. All right, let's do it. That was the end of our sprint. How did you guys do this time?
Well, I got
Chelsea. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just gonna say I got to the end of my chapter, so I'm pretty happy. Top of the spot. Something I found interesting, and it makes you kind of just scratch your head and makes you think about the issues, what we would call PTSD today, but shell shock in World War I, same thing. But you think about what all these guys went through. Right before the chapter ended, it said on March 14th, the sector on our right took a direct hit from a 6-inch shell, and 3 men were killed, 3 others badly wounded. One simply vanished off the face of the earth. Another was turned black. I just can't imagine you're sitting there in the trenches with your comrades, your buddies, your guys that you've probably become very, very close to, and then boom, he's gone. Not just dead, but like literally not there. And that blows my mind. And then when you think about earlier in the book, he was talking about they overran a French trench, and he says, let's see, I woke up in dew sodden grass. There was a stuttering swath of machine gun. We plunged back into the communication trench and moved to a position on the edge of the wood previously held by the French. A Swedish smell and a bundle hanging in the wire caught my attention, and in the rising mist, I leaped out of the trench from a shrunken French corpse. Flesh like moldering fish gleamed greenishly through splits in the shredded uniform. Turning around, he just goes on. I don't probably need to read all of it, but he just goes on. And can you just imagine what that would do to your mindset going into that situation? That would, I know I have enough issues with just anxiety and all that stuff. I might have been shot for cowardice. I'm first to admit, because I'm guessing I would have issues in the head. How do you all feel about that? Maybe you're braver than I am. I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought about that, like going into war before, like some of like the anesthetic, or, I don't know. There's just so many things that would be terrifying about going into war at that time to me.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty terrifying.
Yeah, and I don't think you really know how you'd react until you're in it.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of people who think they would be brave run for cover, without thinking. It's just that instinct to survive. That life instinct is so strong. And then there's people like, Bill, you think you'd be a coward? You might not. You might have been, you just don't know. There's no way to know how you will respond until you are in the fight and in the conflagration.
Well, I know it always opens my kids' eyes when we talk about stuff like this, and they're all, "Oh, I'd be brave. I'd go across the trenches. I'd take them out, or at least go until I was shot." And they always talk, and they say, "How do you think you do, Mr. Rutenberg?" And I would say, "Oh, I would probably have a breakdown. I would probably start crying." And I know my nerves, my hands, I think of Saving Private Ryan when Tom Hanks's character, he gets the shakes. That's what always pops in my head. And I think that would be me. I am not under the spell of, I'm going to be brave. I'm pretty sure I know what would happen to me.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't admit that, but I think I know what would happen.
World War I is unique in that there wasn't, after the first the first push by the Germans into France, and after the first the battles, and then everyone started to dig in, there wasn't an opportunity for any type of that old sense of charging the enemy and bravery. At that point, war was not, you couldn't glorify men who were in trenches like rats, right? Just with almost continuous artillery bombardment that did shatter nerves, that did shatter psyches. I mean, shell shock was real. Some of the accounts I've read of the artillery barrages before the British or the Germans would go over the top to rush the other lines. Some of those bombardments, and they have the statistics of how much ordnance they shot off in that certain amount of time. It's like no one could understand the level of deafening horror, just the sounds of war itself.
Yeah.
It could just rip the humanity right out of you.
When you want to talk about messing with the mind, they talk about how many of those shells didn't explode. And he talks about that in here, where they're finding shells laying in the ground that, one hits your trench and doesn't explode. And I mean, think about how much that would mess with your head. And then he was talking about in here how his buddies, through boredom, like, there's a reason women live longer than men here. So keep that in mind when I tell you this one. But he talks about how him and his buddies, well, they found a shell and it had the inside was exposed, and somebody took their cigarette and put it in. And it exploded. I mean, you think about how stuff like that would even mess with your head.
Yes.
I don't know. Hey, real fast. I am, to everybody watching this, I am a typical guy and I cannot do two things at one time. Okay. And I noticed
putting the comments up.
Yeah, I was kind of looking over in the comments, and as I was looking at that, one of the questions was, what's behind me?
What's behind you? Yeah.
So I'm at school because my internet works way better at school than it does at home. I learned that through a deal with Peg when we did a book chat one time, and it kept cutting out. So I just come up to school to do this, and so behind me, instead of giving you just a really boring blue background, I hung up some propaganda posters from World War I that we use in my classroom. And so we've got, see if I can do this here. We've got just all kinds of different examples of them. I tried to pick the more bright, colorful ones, but most of them are American, but like here's a Canadian one over here. We've got, I don't know, there's several of them. Just answering the question, I can't remember who, Tony asked the question. And so just wanted to answer that. I didn't want to, if I have ignored any questions in the comments, I do apologize. I can't pay attention to two things at one time. You can ask my wife, she'll verify.
And there's been some great book recommendations in the chat, and I've written down a few already. So thank you all, and please keep them coming in this and future videos, because I love it. This breakdown, the shell shock on the Somme, or by Taylor Downing, definitely very interested in that. I've always been very intrigued by shell shock, and I've always been interested in knowing. I like to trace it back even further, because I know in the American Civil War, the things that those soldiers saw were just as horrific. Standing next to someone and a shell flies by and takes that person's head off right next to you. I mean, things like that. So I've been trying to find literature on shell shock in the American Civil War. It wasn't called shell shock, but it was definitely something, a lot of damaged psyches from that war as well, but not reported because people didn't really understand it. Yeah.
Interesting.
There was another question about Barbara Tuchman's The Guns of August as the most quoted history of World War I. Have you guys read that one or heard of that one?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I have not read it. I got it on the shelf. It needs to be read.
It's a classic. I love The Guns of August. I might even say that I loved her book prior to that, Proud Tower, which covers that period where everything was just golden and light and the advance of civilization, and it leads right up to the beginning of World War I. And you really should read those two books in tandem, because they were amazing. She kind of really lays out the whole era. But yeah, Barbara Tuchman's fantastic.
Wow. Thank you, Peg. And we have another question for Bill.
What and where do you teach? I teach in Iowa at Bedford Community Schools. Woohoo! Just a little plug. Our football team's playing for the state title this next week.
That's fantastic, Bill.
Sorry, not to brag, but pretty exciting stuff. But anyway, I teach middle school social studies, grades 6 through 8. We're a small school, rural school, and so I'm the only middle school teacher. And then I also have a high school world history class that it's mainly freshmen, but any of the 4 grades, 9 through 12, can be in the class, but it's usually mainly freshmen.
Do you cover World War I in that class?
I cover World War I very in depth in my 7th grade class, as we're doing geography and history of Europe and Russia. And so I do I've always done a pretty big unit with that. And that's where all the posters, we go to the World War I museum, and kids absolutely love it. And like I said, we just got done watching All Quiet on the Western Front. And so we do a lot in there. They usually enjoy it. And matter of fact, I think one of the things I'm going to do very soon for my YouTube channel is my adopted grandpa was in World War I, and I have his diary, and we read that in class. And I think I'm going to do a whole video reading the diary because it's pretty short. I mean, there's not a lot. He didn't talk much about it. It was pretty horrendous. And he was gassed in the Argonne Forest. And so I think I might read that and use that as a video. I thought that would be kind of interesting, would definitely tie in with World War November.
Wow.
That would be really cool, Bill. I have copies of letters from my family members that were in the war, and it's just so interesting to read.
Mm-hmm.
Like real people that are just like normal, very normal people that didn't get famous for their for anything. It's like, yeah.
Well, and I always find it interesting. I always try to put plugs in for nonfiction reading, because I think reading nonfiction through letters, books, whatever, it's just as entertaining as fiction, and it's real. I've always said that. And I always tell the kids, you just got to find a subject area that interests you. And I sound more like I'm doing a Historathon 2023 plug, but I mean, I seriously have always felt that way. I think that you can learn so much through those letters and the diaries and everything. And then when it's family, it's a personal connection. So.
Chelsea, I missed it. I might have missed it. Did you talk about how you were doing on the sprints, the last 2?
Yeah, I went back and kept reading All Quiet on the Western Front, so I'm up to page 57 now. It's interesting. This book was actually shelved in the young adult section in my library. I went to go pick it up and went through, and I knew it was in library, and I was going back and forth, and I'm like, where is it? And I went back into the computer, and it was in the teen young adult section, which I thought was kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. The quote that I got to right at the end of the paragraph that I was reading when the sprint ended was about kind of them arriving at the front, and it says, "We march up, moody or good-tempered soldiers. We reach the zone where the front begins and become on the instant human animals."
Wow.
It's kind of about how their whole personality and approach changes as soon as they can feel the vibrations from the guns and everything.
Mm.
Wow.
It kind of tied into what I think Peg was saying earlier.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that came to mind when Bill was talking about the unexploded ordnances, one of the World War I battlefields that I've visited is Vimy Ridge. And at Vimy Ridge, there's still enough unexploded ordnances that it's not safe in certain areas to enter. And so when we were there was sheep grazing, and we were like, why do you have sheep in this battlefield museum? And they said that that's the only way they can safely keep the grass down, because it's not safe for someone to enter with a ride-it mower or something.
Wow.
That would be heavy and potentially still explode shells. So they bring sheep in that aren't as heavy and are somewhat more expendable.
Wow.
So they don't think it would trigger the shells.
I see. Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It's like 100 years later, and it's still there's certain places of where the grass, it's like it's super hilly still. Like it's you can totally see how the landscape was affected.
Yeah.
That is wild. Go ahead. Sorry, Faye.
Yeah, a question for me. The Tuckman book I mentioned is The Proud Tower. The Proud Tower.
I'll put it down here.
Yeah, that's a great read. And I had also an interesting quote I wanted to share from my sprint. I went back to Blunden again, talking about unexploded ordnance. This is his first night up at the trenches, or the first week or so, and he's like, in the shallow ditch outside the La Tourette farm, among the black mud, now nearly dry, were to be seen a variety of old grenades, brown with rust, tumbled in with tin cans and broken harness. I looked at them with suspicion, and later on, returning on some errand, I saw them again. Why did no one see to it that these relics were duly destroyed? For that same summer, they brought death to some sauntering Tommy, whose curiosity led him to disturb the heap, seeming safe because of its antiquity. This was a characteristic of the war, that long talon reaching for its victim at its pleasure. I thought that was pretty, how that was portrayed was very, very eerie. Yeah. Long talon reaching for another victim.
I would say this was a very successful sprint.
Yes.
What do you guys think? I'm ready to go off, and I started reading an article that Tony mentioned earlier. So that's probably what I'm going to go ahead and finish tonight. It's about war poetry. It was in response to something Chelsea said. The article is called Combat Gnosticism, the Ideology of First World War Poetry Criticism by James Campbell.
So that's not on lockdown, right? Because I see it's on JSTOR.
It's on JSTOR, but if it says you can read 100 papers free or something like that. So I just went ahead and started reading it, and it looks like all 13 pages are free for me. So
great. Yeah, I also copied that down and put that into my browser. I was trying to find it. So thanks for the recommendations, everybody. Articles, books. It's fantastic.
This was fantastic. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to my co-hosts for coming today. And thank you for everybody in the chat who's been hanging out with us and giving us recommendations. Yeah, I guess I actually have to go to another thing, so I've got to get going. But this was really wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. This is a great first time doing this.
Yes.
Yeah, doing it again.
And again, for people in the comments section, I do apologize for my my inability to do two things at one time. I started getting some of them.
That's the nice thing about having 5 or 4 people on a sprint is somebody is always reading the chat, So, yeah. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you soon. We'll announce it hopefully a little sooner next time.
Yep.